record to the clip. There we go. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. We're getting a few technical glitches worked out here. We had my computer crashed, not crashed, just some, I don't know, something happened. So I switched computers at the last minute. We're just getting everything kind of situated as we roll. Want to welcome everybody. Make sure everybody's in the right webinar. Today we're going to be talking about record keeping for small farm enterprises. And so we're very thankful that you guys could all make it today. And we hope that this is informational to you and that you guys will learn a bunch of good information that you could apply into your small farm business, or if you're running another type of business, I think a lot of these principles are going to be applicable as well. So we'll get started here in just 1 minute. Let a few more people come in, make sure we have everything underway. And AJ, if you see something in the chat or something, because I'm now on my laptop, so it's a little bit difficult to have all the different screens up and still be able to see. So if you see a question being asked and I just don't happen to see it, please inform me and let me know. Feel free to break in anytime. So
yeah, for sure. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Okay, sounds great. All righty. Well, you know what? I think we might as well just get going. We'll let anybody else join, and we'll catch them up when they do come in. So I want to welcome everybody. This presentation is called Record Keeping for Small Farm Enterprises, or Beginning Record Keeping. I forget, I have a couple different titles for it. But we're basically going to be talking about how you can start doing record keeping in your business, in your small farm or your small business. So I want to start out, want to thank the funders that make this possible. These webinars are presented totally free of charge, both from Tolani Lake Enterprises and also through IDRS, Indian Dispute Resolution Services, and the IDRS Acorn Project. That's made possible from our funders like USDA Rural Development. Both TLE and IDRS have a rural business development grant, so we're very thankful for USDA in supporting the work of our organizations. We're also funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration, and we have some folks that are joining us from California. And so our work in California is funded by the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And IDRS is a member of the Elevate Initiative for 2004, and actually an organization there on Navajo, Change Labs, was a previous recipient of the Elevate Initiative. So we want to thank all of these funders for being able to make this webinar possible. And so let me just briefly introduce our organization for those that have not been to a webinar presented by IDRS in the past. We're from an organization called Indian Dispute Resolution Services. We've been around since 1989, and we have two different functions of our organization. On the left, you'll see our logo for IDRS, and IDRS. We started out providing dispute resolution services, dispute resolution training. We still do a lot of that work, officiate tribal council elections and things like that. And so if you want to find out more about that, that side of our organization, please look us up. This slide doesn't have it, but our website is idrsinc.org. And so IDRS for Indian Dispute Resolution Services and INC. So idrsinc.org. But about 10 years ago, we started a program to provide small business development services in Indian country. And so we eventually named that program the Acorn Project. So we call it the IDRS Acorn Project. That website is nativebiz.org. And we provide small business training, just like these webinars that we're doing today. But we also provide in-community small business training and we provide remote technical assistance. And all technical assistance is small business counseling, just one-on-one assistance, anything that we can help you with. We'd be happy to do that. And so you can find out more about all those services at nativebiz.org. One thing I just would mention is that all of the services that we provided are free of charge. That's why we thank our sponsors, our funders, because they make all that possible. So that's a little bit about us. And you guys have any questions about us, and there'll be, I'll put up a slide at the end that will also have some contact information. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-host today, AJ from Tolani Lake Enterprises, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that organization.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So, hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Adriana Tapto, but I like to go by AJ. I am currently the program manager of Tolani Lake Enterprises. And Tolani Lake Enterprises is a nonprofit organization that's based out in Tolani Lake, which is located on the southwestern region of the Navajo Nation. And our work, we focus on strengthening food, water, and economic security. And so we work a lot within our communities, and also those along the Little Colorado River region. And yeah, so we've been in a partnership with IDRS for, I can't say how many years, but it's been quite some time. And I just want to thank Mark for hosting this record keeping workshop for all our viewers today. We greatly appreciate the partnership. Yeah.
And there's your slide with your contact information.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll also drop our website link into the chat as well.
Okay, all righty. Thank you very much, AJ. And, you know, I guess I should have introduced myself. My name is Mark Thompson. I'm the executive director at IDRS. I've been the executive director since 2014, but I've been at the organization since 2003. So I'm on my 21st year now. Just celebrated my 20th anniversary. Been here for a long time, doing a lot of stuff with the organization. And just kind of give you my, you know, why would I be teaching a class like this? So prior to me being the executive director, I was the business manager here at IDRS, and I still continue to do a lot of the accounting work. At the time that I came to work at IDRS, I was also working as a bookkeeper for another organization. Still do some work for that organization. And then I also help my wife run a small horse boarding facility and do all the accounting work for that organization as well. And I've worked for other businesses doing both bookkeeping and accounting work. So I've been around a lot of financial records and seeing how different businesses keep those records. And so wanted to bring you some of that knowledge, and especially helping small businesses get started with record keeping, because it seems real daunting, and sometimes it is, but just wanted to show you kind of some of my experiences, and hopefully that will alleviate some of the, you know, the tension that you may have in getting started. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're going to learn here in this workshop. So, you know, we're going to talk about what is record keeping, why it's important to do, and, you know, why you should do it. We're going to talk about what are some of the records that you might want to keep, both for your farm and also in just general business as well, such as financial records. We're going to learn some of the different record keeping systems, and some of them are kind of very simple, but then we'll at least touch on some of the more, I would say, sophisticated, but it's not necessarily sophisticated. I think a lot of businesses are using things like computer-based accounting, and it's just a matter of how you know, how in depth your business is, how many transactions you have, whether you need to move up to computer-based accounting. And then even within computer-based accounting, there's a lot of different levels that you can do. So we're not going to go heavily in depth on that, because I think a lot of the folks that are on the call today on the webinar may not be ready for that. But I at least want folks that are ready for that, to know what's available, and at least let you know that that's out there when you are ready for it. And then, so you've collected all these records. So what should we be doing with them? So what are we going to get out of them? So those are the things that we're going to talk about today in this webinar. So what is record keeping? And a definition that would be in the dictionary would be like orderly and disciplined practice of keeping of business records, right? That's really what we're talking about, is business records, right? There's all kinds of different records that you can be keeping, right? Obviously, like if you're a school teacher, right, you see they keep a daily attendance report. So there's lots of different records that you can keep out there. But what we're really focused on in this webinar is, what are the records that we need to keep that are going to help us operate our farm or our small business. And so these are going to be, these different records are going to be things like, uh, things you might keep when you're going to do a loan, so could be personal records, right? Because so you're going to need things like your credit report. You may be needing canceled checks, things like that. So that could even be considered business records. Could be things like bank records, bank statements, things like that, even on the personal side. So we're going to be talking about all those type of different records, both financial, but then other things that you might also use, because I think farms are especially unique, and there's going to be some other stuff. And I'm going to be asking you guys what records that you might feel need to be kept in a farm that I'm not mentioning, because as I mentioned, I run a nonprofit, but I am not a farmer. We do some agricultural adjacent stuff and doing the horse boarding. But there's a lot of records that need to be maintained as a farm, right? Everything from doing seed production, maintenance records. And so it would be great to hear of some of the people that are on the webinar, what other records that you feel should be kept as well. Okay, so let's talk about why record keeping is important. So one of the main reasons why I think most people keep records, I think that probably the biggest reason why you should keep records is that it's going to help you run your business better, right? If you know what items that you're selling the most of, if you're seeing when the best time to plant is, if you're seeing when the best time to harvest is, what's the right seed variety to use if you're growing things, right? And this could be the same thing in if you're a rancher and looking at different uh, you know different breeding stock that you're using, or knowing different veterinary records of and when and how that affects the meat production. Those are all very important things that are going to help you run your business better. But I think as we operate our business, a lot of people just kind of know their business well enough that they're like, I don't need to really keep all those records. I have all that up here in the head, right? And especially people that have been doing it for a very long time. So, okay, so, all right, so you may not be keeping a lot of records, and actually, you're not keeping records to run your business. So, why do most people keep records? It's really a reporting function, because there's a lot of government agencies that require you to provide records of what you're doing. Primarily, when we think of that, we're going to be thinking of things like income taxes, right? That can be both state and federal. Some people may be joining us that are from places that don't have a state income tax. But and for many states across the country, they have both a state income tax, and then, of course, everybody in the United States has a federal income tax. And so, and as a farmer, right, you're not only submitting your 1040, but you're also submitting a Schedule F. If you're running a small business, you're submitting a Schedule C, or if you're an organized business, such as an LLC, you may be submitting other documents like a 1065, an informational return, and then submitting K1s into the different members or owners for them to include on their return. So you can see there's a lot of documentation out there, and all those things are going to have tons of questions on them. They're going to want financial data. And so that's why we're keeping those records so that we can fill those forms up and provide accurate recording and not get our businesses in trouble. And there's things beyond income taxes, other types of taxes that oftentimes we need to report on, such as a sales tax. So if there's anybody joining us from Oregon, there's no state sales tax there. So they're probably not having to worry about keeping records that they're going to report to a state organization on sales tax. But down here in California, where I'm located, we have, it used to be called the Board of Equalization. They changed the name to the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. And so they require us to report on sales tax on goods that we sell. And that reporting could be annual. My wife has a seller's permit, but she sells very infrequently. She's oftentimes she's selling just things like tack, horse tack. And so she's only submitting a seller's permit return annually. The gentleman I mentioned earlier that I have been working as a bookkeeper for, he has a monthly requirement to submit to the board or to the Department of Tax and Fee Administration. He has to submit the actual taxes that he's collected every month, and then every quarter we have to give this much larger return. There's depending on where you sell, there's district taxes, so a lot of different things that you can see goes into there. Payroll taxes, other types of licenses and permits. I know that for folks that are dealing with pesticides, a lot of farmers, if they're not growing organically, or I know Tolani Lake is always talking about regenerative agriculture, but if you're using pesticides, oftentimes the state is going to require you to get a license, and they're going to require that you have documentation on what pesticides that you're using in your growing. And so you're going to have to keep records of those type of activities. It could also be other types of financial documentation. I already mentioned things that you might keep, like bank statements, when you're going for a lender, right? But if you're filing for insurance and you have workers, right, you're going to need that payroll data, the type of work that your workers do. If you're going for grants, oftentimes the granting agency is asking for certain documentation. Out here in California during the COVID pandemic, we had a large grant program that was funded by the state of California. And we actually had a lot of our native entrepreneurs that we tried to get that grant were not eligible because they were not keeping records and had not filed it had not filed business taxes, had not filed a Schedule C. So even if they were filing a 1040 on, for like their regular job they may have, they were not filing a Schedule C, that business return for their actual business activities. And then they ended up not being eligible. And the grant that was given by the state was upwards of $25,000. So a lot of native entrepreneurs missed out on those funds because they weren't filing that documentation. So that's why we encourage you to keep records, not only because you may make the decision not to file a business return, but at least have the knowledge, and you can make the choice whether or not to do it based on the best interest of your business. I mentioned earlier the reason why you should keep records is for business planning, but not everybody does it for that reason. But it really does help you decide, what's the products that I should be producing. Maybe that's the produce, the types of things that it should be growing, when to grow so that I have the biggest yield. It could even be things like in operating your business, customer lists, right? who are my best customers? Now, a lot of times people know who the best customers are, but what if you're going to be doing some marketing to those customers, and you want to have all their email addresses? Those are all records, right? And where are you keeping those records? So I think those are important. And of course, we have things like payroll, financial transactions. Um, so a lot of different reasons why you may keep records. And I mentioned this last bullet point just for folks that are on here and they're thinking, well, okay, none of this really pertains to me. There's lots of records that you might want to be keeping for your running just your household, right? And records on maintenance of your vehicles, maintenance of where you live, things like I just was fixing last weekend. We went a full week without hot water, um, and because my water heater went out, and I had to, and I'm I said, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna do it all right. And I was tearing it all apart, and having those records about how, when the water heater should have been flushed and things like that. So there's a lot of different, uh, you know, uh, a lot of different reasons why you would keep records, and knowing how to keep good records is applicable to everybody. There's always going to be something that you're going to want to keep track of, and so it's good to learn how to do it, and do it in a way that's going to work best for you, right? Because one of the things we didn't want to do is come here with a one size fits all, because it's not one size fit all for everybody, right? There's going to be lots of different ways, and some are going to be overkill for the situation that you have. So what we're going to do is introduce a lot of different ways, and then let you choose what you think is best for you. Okay. All right, let's see here. I'm still trying to learn here with the laptop. My mouse is not working because it's for a different computer. So which records are important to keep? So we're going to focus on financial record keeping in this webinar. But as I mentioned before, there's lots of different records that you can be utilizing in your business, right? So things like manufacturing time and processes, right? Now that's going to be more for a business that's manufacturing something, right? Could be things like market research. That's where we were talking about customer lists, but there's a number of different things that you would keep records when doing marketing research. I'm wondering, I've mentioned things like seed production. I've mentioned things like, growing, like when you plant, when you harvest. Um, uh, I've also mentioned things like veterinary records if you're a rancher. I was wondering if anybody in the comments might mention other records that they believe are important for their farm, their ranching operation, or if they're just running a business. What are some different things that you think are important to be? What records do you think are important to be kept? And AJ, feel free to jump in if you have some records that you think are important to be kept that I haven't mentioned.
I was just looking in the chat. Someone said shoebox accounting.
Yes, so so we're going to be talking about shoebox accounting in just a little bit. I
Okay.
see, I see Angie just mentioned cattle sales, right? So there's all kinds of different things, right? So I really was mentioning things like growing, but your farm or your ranching operation is just a business, and so that cattle is just an inventoried product, like a store would have boxes of cereal on the shelf, right? That cattle is your inventory, and you're going to want to know the price at what it was purchased. If you had to feed that cattle, right? That feed is essentially like a cost of goods sold, right? You're bringing in, could be hay, it could be a grain that you're giving. You're going to want to know how much, to the best of your ability, right? You may have to estimate how much feed and what it costs that you gave to each cow, and then what it was sold. So you can really see, did you make a profit? How much was the profit? That's going to allow you to operate your business better. Eleanor mentioned how much feed was purchased at what time of the year, right? Exactly. And so in our horse operation, We just purchased a couple stacks of hay. We have a grass mix, and then we also just got a stack of alfalfa. And we have a lot of hay currently. And my wife was, she was checking the records and saying, okay, they're offering us a really good deal. And even though this is going to last us for a long time, the price was right. So knowing the prices of that feed that you're buying, right? The different thing, if you're even the inputs that you're having to go into the business, it's important to know those records. And I hope I'm not being too uh too basic, I guess. I'm trying to think of the right word, because I know a lot of people, they know these things in their business, especially for folks that have run their operation for a long time. They're going to know what feed costs, and they know what a good deal is. But especially for new farmers, new ranchers, they may not have all those records. And if you're dealing with a lot of different inputs, so like if you're having to run a retail operation, you may not know what all these different items on your shelf normally run, or when it's a really good deal. So being able to go to a spreadsheet and be able to look and say, oh, I see that I'm buying this right now at half the price what this normally sells for. Maybe it's time that I need to stock up on that item. So
We got some more chats in the chat box. Helen Riggs mentioned tools, equipment, seeds, water hauling costs, farm equipment, compost, soil amendments. And then we got another chat from Dawn. Um, Akip Akipton, I cannot pronounce that, has free financial templates on their website of cash flow balance sheets for ag operations. And it looks like they shared a link as well in the chat.
yeah, and I'm forgetting. I'm thinking, is that a partnership with like the University of Minnesota? I've heard of that organization before. And so yes, that's good. There is a ton of free information out there from different universities, different organizations that are providing a lot of good templates, a lot of good resources in how you can both keep records for your farm or ranch operation, but even just running the ranch operation, growing everything, selling, marketing products, pricing. So there's a lot of great information out there. And I don't think a lot of people, they maybe they'll call their local cooperative extension agent, and that person will know and can be able to answer questions out there. But there are so many resources out there. And one of the nice things about when you get into agriculture, because the federal government really wants to support agriculture, you actually have a lot of resources that tend to be free for farmers that really go to helping them operate their business much more than traditional businesses, that are very specific to every type of crop that you may be growing, every type of animal that you're producing. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. So
Yeah, so Don shared it's a Keepton, and they are a native CDFI for native ag operations. Thank you for sharing that, Don.
yeah, thank you very much, Don. And Helen was mentioning a lot of these inputs that go into the business, the different costs, and these are going to be expenses that you'll keep. We'll talk about it on your profit and loss statement. But I'm thinking even within the business that may not be financial, right? Keeping different, you may go out if you're growing a crop and you may take different measurements at different times. What are the water levels in the soil, right? Is the water level at an adequate level? Maybe it's different, different chemicals, the right amount of, I'm forgetting all my terms, but like phosphorus, or the right amount of oxygen levels in the soil. So all these different things, and keeping these measurements, and then you're keeping records for them, right? And those are going to help you, produce better produce or crops. It's going to, or if you're raising animals, produce hopefully bigger animals. And so, so there's lots of different records that you can keep, and non-financial records. And then when we talk about financial records, we have things like receipts, invoices, copies of checks, banks, credit card statements, right? If you're working for somebody, you could be getting a 1099, or you may need to produce 1099s for the contractors that are working for you. Cash transactions, where if you're spending the cash and you may not be getting a receipt, where are you writing these things down? Okay, so we got a lot of different things that we want to keep, records of. So let's start talking about how we might keep these records. So before we really get going into the different ways of keeping records, I want to just kind of give this caveat about designing your record keeping system. So you should really be thinking is, what is the goal that I want to accomplish with any of the different systems that you're going to do? And it may be different systems, right? It may be if you're doing something like if you're measuring the water in the soil that you're growing. Maybe that's only kept on a notebook, because that's not as long as you just kind of have it falls within a range, that's good enough, right? And so you're just being able to take a look and see it, and maybe you want to come back later and say, okay, in August it's a lot less, and so maybe we have to find some way to get irrigation there, whereas in other times it's sufficient for what we're doing, and so we don't. And that just allows you to plan better. But that's only needs to be recorded in a notebook that you can glance at. Whereas maybe with other financial records, especially if you're having a lot of transactions, that may require you actually to go to a computer-based system, because when you're doing reports, you want to be able to quickly generate those reports, or you need to generate reports on a regular basis, and doing it by hand would be too time consuming. So really, it's what is the goal of whatever of the records that you're collecting? What is the goal that you want to accomplish? And I think from that goal is how your record keeping system will develop. And then when you decide, okay, you got your goal now, what pieces of information do you need to accomplish that goal? So do you have all the different ways you're going to get those records? If you need to do a computer-based accounting system, right? Do you have a computer that would be able to run this? If you're going to do something where you're doing something that's going to be online, we're going to be talking about spreadsheets. One of the great spreadsheets now that I use quite frequently is Google Sheets. Google Sheets is an online, totally free software, but it's online. So do you have internet that's going to allow you to access that? And then finally, where in the business is this information that I need to get, and can I get it, right? When we're talking about our soil samples, that's going to be you out there in the field measuring that, right? If it's certain receipts, where are those receipts coming in, and am I collecting those records, right? So that's really what you're trying to see. What's the goal of my record keeping system? And of the things that's going to come in, the different records, do I have access to those? Where are those currently being kept? How am I going to get access? And then do I have the right tools that's going to allow me to operate operate the record keeping system that I choose? Okay, so I mentioned this towards the end, like about what are you planning to get out of these records. But let's talk about just right now, what are we trying to find out from these records, when we do collect them? So one of the things is going to be things like income, right? And we talked about, like, in our financial records, we're going to want to know, are we making a profit? How much revenue that we got, and what's our gross profit? And gross profits where you deduct the revenue versus what they call your cost of goods sold. And then after you take your overhead out, what's your net profit? So, we're we're keeping records of what's the different sales, the different revenue that's coming into our business, the different income. We're also keeping records to know the expenses that are going out. And then, of course, if we subtract those two, we get our profit. So we're actually trying to find out a lot of times what are the different things in our business that are going to help us run our business better. So some of the important thoughts as you're designing your record keeping system, I think one of the first things as you're beginning, you want to make sure that you're starting simply, that you're not, especially if you're not doing a lot within your business, you don't have a lot of transactions, that you're not immediately jumping to computer-based accounting, because if you're going to computer-based accounting, you're going to have to learn a program. There's going to be an expense oftentimes with that. And and if it's very complicated and you're not utilizing it all the time, a lot of times you're not going to be able, or you're not going to be in the system and wanting to be in the system and wanting to get good information out of the system. I have a point there that says garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're not putting good information into your record keeping system, then you're not going to get a lot of good information out of your record keeping system. So that's what, when we put information into our record keeping system, we want to make sure that it's the right information that's going in. Those records are being kept in a way that they're being sorted. They're going into the right location, so that when we want to pull that information out, that we're getting the information out of the record keeping system that we want. Also, how detailed do the records need to be? And what I mean by this, I think the easy way to demonstrate this would be, like an example. If we were running a stand at like a farmer's market, um, you could actually go and have a receipt for every single customer. How much of, let's say that you're growing squash, how much squash has each customer bought? You could do it by weight. All these, you could really get very granular. And that's what often happens when you go into a grocery store, right? They have every single thing that's tagged, and they're weighing. If you're doing produce, they're weighing everything. If you're doing something that's a packaged material, they're scanning it, and so they know exactly what's coming through as they make those sales, right? And they're knowing everything that's coming into their business, and they know everything that's going out. But if you're running a small, a small stand at a farmer's market, that may be too complicated for you. It may be too time consuming. It may be too distracting. Like if you're trying to interact with customers, but you're also trying to gather all this information, that really may not. It may take away from your ability to sell and interact with the customer. So that may be too much to get that level of detail in your sales. But knowing what you started with, and knowing like maybe the weight of squash you started with, and when the day is over, the weight that you end with, or the number of squash that are in a basket and the number of squash you end with, right? And you can kind of estimate. You'll know how much money you had because you'll actually have that into the till. And maybe all you want to do is you have a notebook where all you do is you just do a check mark every time somebody goes and purchases squash, or every time you have a customer. That may be enough to show you the information that you need to show. Maybe squash is a popular product, or maybe it's not a popular product. Maybe maybe you have a lot of customers, and maybe you're doing a number of different farmers markets. So you can see, okay, well, this farmers market, I had a lot of customers. Or maybe you changed something in the farmers market setup. Maybe you put the squash up front as opposed to having it in the back. Did I sell more? And just by having some of those check marks would give you enough of that indication. Or by weighing it and seeing how much I sold per pound, or sold by the number that are sold, that would give you enough of an indication. So you don't have to have to know everything, right? It's like I said before in the previous slide, it's really what are the goals that you want to get out of your record keeping. And then you can design the record keeping system for whatever process you're doing, right? And you may have a number of different record keeping systems depending on what you're doing. You can design it for your goal, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It can the complication of the system will match what the information that you want to get out of it. Of course, cost is always an issue, as well as the time. And I mentioned not only the time there, like at the farmers market, but the time in learning like a computer-based accounting a system, right? If you're doing maybe, I'm just going to, as an example, maybe you're only doing 10 transactions a month. um, it may take you longer to learn the computer-based accounting system and making sure it goes in right. And if something goes wrong, trying to troubleshoot that may take longer than just doing those transactions by hand in a notebook, right? So we don't want to recommend, say, hey, go get the computer-based accounting. It works for everybody, because you may not need that. So that's what we mean by a time consideration. Be thinking about the size of your business, the number of transactions that you have, because I think that's going to be a big consideration in the type of records that you keep and the type of systems that you use to keep those records. And then, are there other ways to help out in keeping these records? So, like to give you an example, in a separate bank accounts, right? So, maybe finding ways about what are ways to say what are my how much money came into my business versus how much money went out versus my personal, right? When you have everything going into your personal bank account, now to really find that information, you have to go and look at each one of those transactions. Was this business related or was this personal related? Just by keeping a separate bank account, yes, it won't show you, I mean, you can see generally what's come in just by looking at the statement, right? How you started the month and at the end of the month. You do have to go into the statement to find what is the revenue, what is the expenses. But just by keeping the separate bank accounts alone, it gives you a better indication. So when there's easy ways like that will help you get that information, be sure to choose those ways, because it'll just help you out and it'll make your record keeping that much easier. So let's go in and talk about different methods. So I got to go back up here in my comments. And I think it was Michelle. So Michelle, you said the shoebox accounting. Well, we're going to start with the shoebox method. Okay. So what is the shoebox method? The old, I guess the old saying of what the shoebox is you would, you get all these receipts as you go through the year. You put them in a shoebox, so you got your box full of receipts, and then when it's tax time, you just take your shoebox and you take it down to your accountant or your tax guy and say, here it is, good luck, right? And it's up to the tax guy to sort it all out. And um and for a lot of people, that's a method that they do. They don't uh, feel that they need to know day by day what's being spent. They have a good idea of the way their business is going, right? And so for the shoebox method, just being able to keep receipts, and then if we're going to have to report for, like, let's say tax time, that's going to be enough for them. I have all the receipts that will at least allow me to get the deductions that I need to get. So, so how this works, everything goes into a shoebox, right? And then it gets sorted and processed at the end of whatever period it is. And so you could do a shoebox method monthly, right? You're putting everything in the shoebox and then you pull it out monthly. It does not have to be at the end of the year, but sometimes it is at the end of the year, right? And these records may be given to a third party, like a tax professional, especially if you don't feel comfortable in doing this accounting work yourself. But you may just pull it out and start adding it up using an adding machine and a sheet of paper, right? Because it's a very simple system to do. So what are the pros of something like this, right? So, you're keeping records. So first I want to say Hey, anybody who's doing the shoebox method, there's nothing wrong with that because at least you're doing it, right? Because there's lots of people out there that may even be running businesses that are keeping hardly any records at all. Very difficult for them to do, at tax time. They're trying to find stuff, search anywhere, search credit card statements, anything they can do because they really have not kept any records at all during the year. So at least if you're doing the shoebox method, you're on the road. So you should be commended for that. It's obviously very inexpensive. You don't have to buy anything to do that. You probably have a shoebox or some other box lying around. Just throw some stuff into it. Um, it's easy, right? At least in doing the process of collecting the receipts, right? You're just throwing the stuff in there. You don't really have to do anything more than put it in the box, and it's accessible. So let's look at the flip side. So what are some of the cons of the shoebox method? And so I mentioned that before about knowing the information currently in your business and how you operate it, right? And so as you operate your business, you don't know what's going on day by day, at least financially, because you have not gone through those records. You've not seen how much money that you spent. I mean, some people feel like, hey, if I got money in my pocket, my business is going great, right? And so um, you may want a little bit more day-to-day knowledge or month-to-month knowledge than that, right? And like I said, the shoebox method doesn't have to be annually. It could be monthly, but some people need more information than even being monthly. So that's, one of the things is with the shoebox method, it's generally not current. All right. And it's definitely probably not day to day, right? You guys aren't, somebody who's doing the shoebox method is not keeping records. They wouldn't go into the shoebox method if it was going daily, right? It's going to go into some sort of other accounting system. Um, and so if you're not keeping those records on a daily basis or on a weekly or on a monthly basis, it's not really actionable information that you can use in your business, right? You may not need that, but that may be the case. Um, and then, you know, we talked about it being inexpensive, but it could be costly depending on the cost of your tax person. I was just meeting with a client, and she said she went to a Jackson Hewitt, which is this kind of tax preparer, to prepare her taxes. It ended up costing $1,200, right? So sometimes these CPAs, these tax preparers, can be very expensive, right? And so if you're giving something for the CPA to do or the tax preparer to do, they're going to be charging you for that. So the flip side of that is if you could be doing more yourself, that will reduce some of the cost, right? So it can be both, time consuming if they take a long time to do it, or it's also time consuming in the time for you if you're preparing, right? If you have not touched these receipts for a full year and now you have a box that's jammed full of receipts and now you have to sit at this table and get out the adding machine and that may take a long time to do and it's subject to mathematical errors, right? As you're adding these things up. So, but you know what? If you're on the shoebox method, and I too am on some sort of shoebox method, in just a little bit, I'm going to show you my system. Before I used to show it live, but I actually took a picture of it and put it in the presentation. I'll show you, and I'm kind of on the shoebox method at least to start for what we're doing. So you can say you're like me. Okay, so what else we got? What other method? Um, I just want to mention the other types of boxes, right? And so these are like the shoebox method. It's just you may be keeping things in a box because that helps you know where something is. And so those could be like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a box. It could be in a file folder, could be in an accordion file, could be in an envelope. Um, could be things like you have an envelope specifically for your quarterly taxes. So you may be putting some money that there's some financial planners that recommend an envelope system where you have different expenses that you're going to have and you're putting money in those envelopes as time goes by so that when those bills eventually come due, you can go to the envelope and that money is already in there, right? You don't have to go scrounging for it. You don't have to expect it to be in your bank or in your pocket, and all of a sudden, oh, I spent that because for whatever reason, right? Could be an emergency, the refrigerator went out, or it could be something that, hey, I was having a good time last night, or we went to the powwow this weekend and blew all the money, right? So if it's in the envelope, then you at least should, you know it's there, right? It could be things like you may have envelopes for just even having bills where you have, okay, these bills are coming up. When I got out of college, I worked at an accounting place that it was a manufacturer of explosives. And one of the things that they did, they were very big on managing when they spent money. So they only wanted to send money on bills when it was due. So they're keeping money in the bank. They're trying to maximize the interest that they're getting on cash. And so we would have a big drawer, and I would be in charge of making sure that all these bills would go in this drawer. And I would have different file folders that would show dates of when the bill would be due. And as the dates would come up, I would open the folder, pay all the bills in that, right? And then move it to the back, right? Because it's rotating through the years. And they just wanted to make sure that that even though a bill may have come in, like let's say in March, if that bill's not due till May, you make sure that you don't pay that bill until May, right? You're not sending that cash out until it has to go out, and that's a really good a really good way to run a business. Or I should say a really proper way to run a business, right? Because in running a business, cash is king. And so you never want to run out of cash, because if you run out of cash, that's how a lot of businesses go. They go bankrupt, right? They don't, it's not that the business is not good. It's not that they don't have a good idea. It's that they actually run out of money, and they don't have the ability to get credit to hold them over. And so the bill, they just are not able to meet their obligations. They can't get any more money. They can't get any more product, and they go out of business. So so that's a really sound way, making sure that you don't spend cash till it's due. I think for most people, I know for me, that a lot of times when a bill comes in, if I'm able to pay it, I try to pay it, just because I don't have a system set up like that. It's probably going to get into a stack of papers, and then I'm liable to forget about that bill, and then it gets late, and then I end up owing more money than if I would have just paid. And that's generally how I'm doing it. But you could see, however you're running your business, whatever's right for your business, you need to do it. It could also, it doesn't, this also does not have to be just for financial records. I mentioned their callbacks, right? So you may have customers that you're in a sales process and they're not ready to buy. And maybe you've asked them, hey, should I call you next month? Or hey, can I come see you next month? And so if you just have that in your head, there's a good chance that you'll forget that, not call that customer, or be too late when that customer said, "Oh, I thought you were coming this month and you didn't call me, so I went and got it from somebody else," right? So you can have a file to where, okay, I said I'm going to call back this person on this date. You write it in a calendar, or you have a little 3x5 index card you put in a box, and you have that by date, and you could say, okay, this month I need to call these people back. And they call that a tickler system, because it's always tickling you, right? You go to the time of the month, and it tickles you that, hey, I need to do these certain things. So that's just another way of keeping records. You can see, and it's not computer based. It's very simple, very analog, and it works, right? And it could work for your business. Now, obviously, if you're getting where you have to call hundreds of people, if you're in a high end sales profession and you have to always be reaching out, or you have tons of customers. Let's say you're running a farm operation and you're doing like a CSA box, and you have dozens and dozens of people that you call on every month to make sure that they're going to take the CSA box that you're providing. Having something just on index cards, that can get very cumbersome, right? That may be where you move up to something that's computer based. That's why we're talking about those things where um, you know, it's got to be appropriate for the number of records that you're trying to keep, and what you're doing, and, and the type of records that you're keeping. So, pros of these boxes, maybe it's more organized than just the shoebox, right? Because in the shoebox, we're just throwing receipts in there. Here we have some organization. We have some file folders. Also fairly inexpensive, fairly easy, a little easier to find items, right? If I said, hey, I need to go find that receipt from 6 months ago, maybe I have my receipts monthly, right? As opposed to just in a box. Some of the same cons as the shoebox method, not up to date. Also, if we're doing financial records and I'm having to add up, it's also subject to mathematical errors. Okay, but you can see it does not have to be complicated to at least start keeping records, and there's lots of different ways that you would keep records that would be appropriate for these very simple methods. Another simple method, but maybe a little bit more, a little bit more organized, is just using a notebook. So I just call it the notebook method, but all it is just getting a notebook and you're keeping records in a notebook. And you might have a number of different, notebooks. I was going to say, I thought I had a notebook. I guess I took it into the other room, but I have a notebook here. If there's a journal for, if you have an idea journal, that could be a notebook, right? When we're talking about those water readings, right? You may have a book just of all the different water readings that you have taken. You could have like I mentioned earlier, if you're going out to the farmer's market, you could have a notebook and say, you at the top of the page, you just put the date, where you are. Maybe you have a few different products that you put there, and now you're just keeping check marks. And then if you ever want to go and see, maybe you're going to that same farmer's market the next year, you can go back to that page and say, okay, what were the things that sold? How did that differ from some of the other farmers markets I went to? And you would have all those records, right? And it wasn't very complicated to keep those records, right? Every time somebody buys something, maybe you're only doing a little mark there, but it's giving you some valuable information that you can use in your business, especially the next time you're going to that farmer's market. And then there are some more specialized notebooks as well. We basically had computer-based accounting since the 70s. Spreadsheets started, and then as computers have, especially home-based computers, have gotten more prevalent, we started some of these programs. I think it was like Peachtree Accounting became the first one where they would do double entry accounting, and then it's moved up to QuickBooks. But before, most people that were doing accounting would do accounting using a ledger book. And a ledger book is just something you would buy like at an office supply store, and you would actually write all your transactions and do them by hand. And so you could still go buy a ledger book. Not many people use it because it is time consuming, right? And you're doing all the math by hand. So it is open to errors, but it's still out there, right? And a ledger book is just a different type of notebook with some pre-printed pages in there that is going to help you do accounting. There could be some specialized books that you use for farm records, right? If you're actually transporting animals, or you're transporting crops, right? That the person that's driving that truck is going to have logbooks, right? And that logbook is just a record of their time on the road. You have mileage logs, right? Mileage logs for vehicles when you're taking taxes. So you can see there's all these different, could be very specialized, different notebooks of records that you're keeping. More organized in a shoebox method, right? Because you can keep each one of these in a different notebook, easy to collect data. It can be reconciled on a regular basis, right? So you can go through and you could say, okay, here's my mileage, and I've just kept it in order. Now you can go through and add those pages up, and maybe even do a mark that shows that you have gone through those pages. So, and it's all right there, in that notebook. Easy to do the math. Maybe even after you get to the bottom of a page, you do a little tally down at the bottom, so that over a certain time, maybe a week, you can just add those different tallies at the bottom of a page. And so the addition and keeping track of things can be a lot easier in this notebook method. However, just like a lot of receipts, if you have a lot of records on a page, it can be a little unwieldy, right? If you're making errors, if you're going back, right, you have multiple pages. I mean, it can be a little bit crazy in a notebook. Um, but I think we've all written in notebooks, so we kind of see how it could work depending on and where, if I had a lot of records, where my system would really outgrow the notebook method. But want to let you know, I mean, having notebooks around is a great way. And depending on where you go, I mean, like a lot of times, I mean, I know I live in the country as well, but if you're out on Navajo, you're a lot farther to a Walmart than I am to a Walmart. But I'm only about 30 minutes. But if you can get to a Walmart, I mean, I use books like even
Yeah.
notebooks. I think I got one right here.
Yeah, someone mentioned they sell ledger books at Office Depot too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I even use like notebooks like this to keep notes. I think people could see this, right? I think this notebook um at Walmart cost me 33 cents. I mean, these things don't have to be expensive, and this would be a great thing. Like if I'm out in a field somewhere, just I could keep a record, and every day I could go back to that page and be having those records, and this could always sit with me in a pocket or in my truck, or so always having something like that around to keep those records, I think, are important. So okay, so let's move on. So we're moving up now. We're going to move. We've done everything pretty much analog, right? We've been doing stuff in the shoebox method. We've been doing stuff, keeping things in boxes, physical paper, physical records. We've had a notebook that's physical. We've been writing in it. Now we're going to get into where we start using electronics, right? Computers. And so, but it doesn't necessarily just have to be a computer. It could be your cell phone, right? Your cell phone, for most people, they have a smartphone, they're holding a mini computer. And so, first method I want to talk about is the spreadsheet method. And for those of you who haven't used a spreadsheet, all it is just a giant page full of boxes, right? But the nice thing about those boxes is those boxes can list things. So you can have different lists and organize them in columns or rows. And most spreadsheets allow you to do math, and one box can influence another box. So if I have like a row of, let's say, different items that I'm going to be selling, right? I could duplicate that in a notebook, right? But then when it's time to add that up, I have to actually get out a calculator and add those up in the notebook and then write down the total. If I was doing this in a spreadsheet, I could do a formula like equals sum and do a parentheses and then do a range like A1, colon A12, and that'll add everything it'll add everything that's a number in A1 through A12 and give me a total. And so it makes it a lot faster. The computer is not going to make errors as long as my formula is correct. And so the spreadsheet method can do a lot for you, especially when you have a lot of records or you're going to be doing math. The spreadsheet, I think, is a superior method. And now with Google and some of these other offerings, you can have access to spreadsheets for free. Before, I think the first one that came out was Lotus 123, and then shortly thereafter, Microsoft Excel. And of course, Microsoft Excel is the dominant spreadsheet, and you have to pay for Microsoft Excel. But as long as you have a Gmail account, right? That's the Google Mail, Gmail. A personal account from Gmail, they give you access to Google Docs, which is their word processing software, to Google Sheets, which is their spreadsheet, Google, I forget what it's called, but they have presentation software. And so there's a lot of things that Google offers you free of charge. One of the things with Google, they do have a way that you can download it. So I should say, first of all, with using Google Sheets, you can do it on your phone. And it works. It works well. I've pulled up spreadsheets, but spreadsheets have lots of small boxes, right? Small boxes that you're typing into. Um, Especially if you got big thumbs, for those of us that maybe have a little gray in our beard, it gets to be a little difficult working with a spreadsheet on a phone. I will say that. So it's definitely possible, but as your spreadsheet starts to grow, if you're trying to do it on a phone, it may become very frustrating. So having some form of computer is probably a really good solution. And one of the things about Google Sheets also, if you're using it on a computer, it's an online program. They do have some plugins that you can download that will allow you to use it offline. But I was even thinking like a Chromebook. So a Chromebook uses the Google operating system, and oftentimes you can find Chromebooks very inexpensively. I mean, brand new, you could probably buy them on the internet for $200, $300, but sometimes they'll have refurbished ones under $100, right? And so if you can get a Google or a Chromebook and run Google Sheets, you could be doing a lot of this very inexpensively. But the only thing with the Chromebook is I don't know how much you can do without internet. That's one of the downfalls of the Chromebook. It's really built to be connected to the internet while you're working. So you can do a lot of this for free if you have stable internet, but if you lose the internet, you may permanently lose access to your records. But if you're planning on sitting down for the evening and going to work on your spreadsheet and you lose internet, and then you can't work, it's kind of a downer. And I've had that kind of situation before when we've had some things that are cloud based and I can't get access to them. And so as much as possible, I try to find some way to have a local option. If you have a Windows based computer, there are programs that you can download, and they're not cloud based, but totally free of charge. And I have it listed there. It's called LibreOffice. It's a suite just like Microsoft Excel, and it provides a spreadsheet option called Calc, and you could install that into a computer, download it totally free of charge, and you can utilize it. You can even export it if somebody needs to, like, let's say you have a tax guy and you said, hey, here's my profit and loss. I prepared it myself, and you're going to email it to him, but he doesn't have LibreOffice. You can actually email it as an Excel document. There's a way to save as. And so there's some definite options to get yourself on a spreadsheet without having to pay for it. You do have to have some form of computer or a smartphone, but those options are, if you do have a computer, there's options to utilize spreadsheets for free, either online, or you at least have to have a little internet to download LibreOffice the first time. But once you get it on the computer, or go somewhere where they do have Office, have them put it on a flash drive for you, and then you can take it home and install it. So what are the pros of like the spreadsheet method? So spreadsheets can do math for you. I talked about how you may utilize, utilize the spreadsheet to do if you're adding a row. But there's all kinds of different math that you can do. To give you an example, I when I'm conducting a tribal council election, I want to generate random numbers for when I'm sending absentee ballots. So each voter has a totally random number, and so when they're sending in the ballot, their ballot can't be traced to anybody but them. And so they have a function that I use, equal rand between. That's a random number between, and I normally do a six-digit number, and it just calculates a six-digit number for me, totally random. And then I use another formula. It's called if count if. It equals count if. I know these are a little difficult because you're not seeing them, but the purpose of this is not to get these different formulas that may be a little bit more advanced. I just wanted to give you kind of an example of how I'm using them. But I do that to count a column, and if there's a duplicate, it'll alert me, right? So I'm using these different formulas in the spreadsheet to generate random numbers, to make sure there's no duplicates, to add rows of columns together. There's a function called concatenate to do upper rows of columns and make all the letters uppercase or sentence case. There's all kinds of different things. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be just all financial, or different math things that you're doing. These spreadsheets can be very powerful. Another thing that is, I think, very powerful when you get into the electronic realm is that, let's say I'm keeping records in my handy notebook here, and for some reason I lose this, and I have dozens and dozens of, maybe weeks, months, years in this book, and it's gone, right? I lose all that data. Whereas if you have a spreadsheet, especially if you have access to the internet, you can do it on a floppy drive, or that's old school, right? Or a flash drive. But if you have access to the internet, you can get a cloud storage service. Of course, if you sign up for Gmail and you're using Google Sheets automatically does it. But even having access to Google Drive, you could use Google Drive. They give you 15 gigabytes totally free of charge if you have a Gmail account. And you can save your spreadsheets in the cloud so that if your computer ever dies, if it's stolen, if it's destroyed for whatever reason, that data is never lost, right? You just get a new computer, download it to your computer, and you're up and running again. So that's the valuable thing when you have records that are electronic, right? They can be backed up very inexpensively, if any cost at all, and you have access to keep going with them if something were to happen, right? You have to make sure that you remember to back up. One of the things that I do with almost all of our financial data, all of our spreadsheets, anything that I'm doing, grant reporting, I save everything in a folder on my cloud storage provider. So it's on my computer, but what happens is every time I hit the save button, it automatically starts backing up to the cloud. IDRS uses a program called box.com, but there's a number of other big ones out there. I just mentioned Google Drive. There's Dropbox. I'm sure most people are familiar with Dropbox. Microsoft has one called a OneDrive. So there's a number of these cloud storage providers. Almost all of the cloud storage providers provide some storage free of charge. If you're just storing things like spreadsheets, spreadsheets are very low. The size of the file is very small. You could store more spreadsheets than you could ever create. Even on the free levels of most of these cloud storage providers. But that's what I'm doing for IDRS. Every time I create a financial document, I save it right into this one folder that goes to Box. And so if anything ever happens, all that financial data is always stored. I also do use QuickBooks, have it on my computer, but I store the company file in an online folder. So if anything happens, that company file is there. And then I also back up to an online folder so that if anything was to happen, I can always restore my backup from that backup. Or even if that one file was to be corrupted, I always have these backups that I could restore from. So that's a real value of having your records electronically, is that you can really get them backed up. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later about having a service provider. If you have a service provider that you utilize, you can send those documents to them. So what are some of the cons? You have to have access to a computer. Online work requires an internet connection, right? I mentioned these things. And, a spreadsheet. When you first open a spreadsheet, I should have a picture of a spreadsheet here. A spreadsheet is just boxes, tons and tons of boxes. And it's overwhelming. It's like, especially if you've never used a spreadsheet before, what do I do? Where do I put stuff in? And it takes a while to really start getting to know how to use those spreadsheets. So there is definitely a learning curve when you start moving to these electronic methods. So pros and cons. So hopefully you'll choose what's right for you. And I know that I will probably over a little bit. But I did want to just mention briefly computer-based accounting, because there's lots of different programs for that. QuickBooks is the most popular software, but there's other things like FreshBooks and Xero. And it doesn't necessarily, now QuickBooks is a computer-based accounting. That's to keep financial records for your business. But there's also programs like Salesforce. Salesforce is a type of customer relationship management. That's to keep like sales contacts, information about their birthdays. You can put all kinds of different things they bought. I mean, there's some pretty sophisticated different types of customer relationship management programs that are out there, and there's a whole host of other different programs depending on the type of business that you're running. Since we're talking mostly here about farms and ranches, I know even for horse boarding, there's specific programs that are built in how to keep records for your horse business, right? So I'm forgetting the name of the program, but it'll like you can enter the name of the horse that you have. And you could designate what the stall stall number is. And then you could even put records in there, like so if there's special feeding requirements. And there's a lot of those same type of record keeping systems for farms as well, right? So that's what, with the proliferation of computers everywhere, so has the proliferation of these very specialized programs. The only one, I shouldn't say the only issue, one of the main issues, obviously you have a lot of the things that you're dealing with having a learning curve with any of these programs. But what tends to happen is most of these programs have a cost, and sometimes a substantial cost, right? So if you're not making a lot of money currently in your operation, it might not be feasible to even purchase one of these. Operation might not be big enough to really warrant purchasing them, right? It may be really overkill for what you're doing. But you may get to a certain level that these really specialized programs may be the right thing for your business, because it's going to really be built for your farm operation. It's going to have a lot of the types of records that are really built for farms, and so you're not having to go create things. It's all built into this one package. It's all it's all kept in one place, and they're probably having a lot of those safety systems built in, like automatic backups, so that they're ensuring that if you're using their programs, that your records are being kept safe. So what are some of the pros? Powerful, flexible, right? It could be built for in different tasks. You could put lots of information. Generally, as long, like we said earlier about garbage in, garbage out, as long as you're putting good information in there, you're not going to have math errors. The computer is going to know and excuse me, and do the math correctly. It can be much quicker. So if we have a lot of transactions, it's going to be much easier to get a report out of there because the system is going to do it automatically for us. But it could be expensive. A computer is required, and there is a learning curve. And I just wanted to mention real quickly on, for like financial accounting, because we have QuickBooks, but there's a whole host of even financial accounting. Because QuickBooks, I used to teach QuickBooks here at IDRS, but what happened with QuickBooks is it's gotten so expensive, it's not really appropriate for most of our micro entrepreneurs. Micro entrepreneurs, right? They're normally operating their business out of their home. It's just them in the business, and paying sometimes upwards of $300 to $600 a year for an accounting system really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when they're not having that many transactions. Down at the bottom there is a program called Wave. Wave is a free accounting software. And so we were doing classes on Wave. One of the issues with Wave, though, is it's not as sophisticated as QuickBooks. There and some of the things, it's not as smooth or easy as QuickBooks either. So like if you want to assign, it's hard unless we were to get in there. We just don't have the time today. But there's things like if you want to assign a client or a customer or a vendor, it may take many clicks to do that. Whereas in QuickBooks, it would be automatic. And there's things like that. And even though now Wave and looking to survive, right? They have to make money to survive. They originally tried to make money just by doing credit card transactions. So every time you would process a credit card, they would get a little bit of money. And then they also tried to do it based on payroll. But there's a lot of people that are utilizing Wave accounting that don't have any employees, right? So a lot of people were using this free of charge, and they said, hey, we need to find a way to make money from these customers. So now they have a pro version. And so on the pro version, I think one of the main things on the pro version is if you sign up for the pro version, you can download all of your transactions from a bank account or a credit card automatically. Whereas if you just have the free version, there is still a free version. It is you have to enter them manually. Now, for me, I do all my accounting still for my business. I do everything manually. I enter every single transaction. I never go to I never just download it because I need to code every transaction, and it's just easier to code as I'm going along. So so for me, there's no value in having that. But I think for most people, they're not accountants. They're not doing this all the time. The convenience of being able just to connect to a credit card and have all those transactions come in. You still need to look at them. You still need to make sure that Wave put them in the right location. But that adds a real level of convenience and probably makes a lot of people much more likely to do their accounting than if they had to sit there and enter transactions for an hour. So, and I think, but this is just like we've mentioned with any of these different accounting systems, it's really going back to what do you need, right? Every one of these is going to give you the basics of what we do in financial accounting, right? A profit and loss sheet, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement. But do you need online access, right? Do you need to be able to, check your accounting system from multiple computers? Do you need to be able to send it to a third party like a tax preparer? Do you need integration with your bank, like I just mentioned with Wave? Do you need payroll? Do you need to accept payments? Do you need help, right? One of the big things is with QuickBooks, why QuickBooks is still kind of the king is because QuickBooks, there's so many installations out there that you have lots of these, what they call a QuickBooks certified advisor. There's even people like me. I'm not a certified advisor, but I've used QuickBooks for so long I know QuickBooks, inside and outside. So it would be very hard for me to switch to go to something like a Xero or a Sage because I know where everything is on a QuickBooks. I'm very quick on QuickBooks. And so that's what happens is a lot of people just stay. It's just easier to go with QuickBooks, right? And if you're making a decent amount of money, it could be expensive. I'm not going to lie. I mean, like if you're running an inventory and you have payroll, you're probably paying over $1,000 a year for QuickBooks. But it for a lot of businesses, it's just a cost of doing business. And one of the things is also a big issue. I think Wave is going to stick around, so Wave may be a good place to start. But if you're paying for any of these, you have to really think about like Zoho Books down there. Now, Zoho is a fairly large company. It's an Indian company, East Indian, country of India. But they're fairly established now. But let's say they weren't established, right? If you go with Zoho Books, and actually, this actually happened in 2022. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the company GoDaddy. They do websites and the domain name registration. They actually offered an accounting platform called GoDaddy Accounting. They ended up closing it. So if you have all your records on GoDaddy, you've been spending all your time, you've learned the system, you've spent the time, and now they close. Now you have to find a way to migrate all that data. You may not even be able to migrate that data because it's very hard. A lot of these platforms make it very difficult to import data, both import and export data, because they want to keep you locked in. So if you go with a provider that may be outdated or goes out of business, I mean that could it could really be hurtful to your business. Just to give you an example, what happened with this gentleman that I work for that does tires, we actually switched him because he was doing QuickBooks on a desktop and we wanted him to do it online so I could help him remotely because we didn't live in the same city any longer. Um, and when we did that, that 2015 information did not transfer to the new QuickBooks that he did online. And so he actually had to maintain that 2015 for a couple years. So if he needed to go back to find a customer, if he needed to go back to find certain inventory items. And so, but luckily he had that 2015 on his desktop. I feel really bad for folks that had GoDaddy accounting. If they were utilizing that and it went out of business, if they weren't able to go back and keep that information, and they may need it. They may need it for tax, documents going back, or it could be a number of different things. I think about for IDRS, if we ever needed to go back for an audit, we have to have those records. And if we went with a system that went bankrupt, it could be very, very costly for us. Um, so as you know, we're getting here. We're already on almost on an hour and a half. I was going to do an exercise. I don't really have a whole lot of time for that today, but I did promise at the beginning I was going to show my accounting system. And so this is actually in my closet. If I'm looking here, if I look to the right, that's actually what it looks like in my closet currently. If you look up at that top box, you'll see that's all my receipts. I collect all my receipts, and when I get them, they go all in that box. So I'm conducting in my own accounting life a shoebox method. I put everything in there. Now, I don't wait till the end of the year. Sometimes it takes me more than a month, though. And what I'll do is I'll actually pull all the receipts out of there, and I kind of have a hybrid system. So I'm collecting my receipts in that box, and then I go and do all my reconciliation and record all those receipts. And I actually use QuickBooks. I have a desktop version, and so I put all, not only our business records, but I put our personal records in QuickBooks as well. And you can actually see, and if you look down below, you'll see all those yellow envelopes. I actually save all of our receipts as well. And they go into those different envelopes. And you'll actually see what's in an envelope here if I hit this button. So that's what actually looks like. There's March 2023, and you can see I have all my receipts that come in. So that's actually what I do. I have all my receipts in that box. Then I take them out and I process them and I put them in these different envelopes. And if I ever need to go back to find a receipt, I can go back into these different months. If I was ever audited by the IRS, I could go back and document these expenditures. So I'm doing kind of a hybrid shoebox method. I kind of have these other kind of, it's sorted a little bit after a while, right? For the first month, it goes into the shoebox, then it goes into these other box methods, these different envelopes. But then as I'm reconciling them, as I'm putting them in these different envelopes, I'm also recording them in my computer-based accounting. So I'm doing kind of a hybrid model with just our financial stuff and our own business. And then, I'll just finish up. So what are we doing with these records now? So we have all this information, we've collected all this stuff. So, we want to answer especially financial questions, right? Where's our money going in our business, right? Is it going, do we have one line item that's much higher than it should be, right? Do we have one product that's or a category of products that is really generating a lot of sales? We can see that through our accounting. Hopefully, by the records that you're keeping, it will show you this. It will show you what are the products that you're selling. What's the right time to plant? What's the right time or to harvest? What produce or what crops should you be growing? All those different things. I think that's what you want your accounting system to be doing. I think another thing that we focus on is, will I have money tomorrow? And when I say that is if we're if we're not able to borrow money, we want to make sure that we're not running out of cash. Or if I'm going to have to borrow, I can start preparing now, and I'm getting those records, those financial records that I can provide to the lender, so they may be able to provide me a loan, right? And I'm able to provide that documentation now. And then, of course, one of the main things is, what is my income tax liability? And if if I have a certain number of sales, how am I able to document these expenses so I can reduce that liability, right? I can reduce how much money that I owe in taxes, and having this documentation and being able to demonstrate those expenses will allow you to reduce what you end up paying in taxes. So, and then of course, from from those records that you put into the system, hopefully you're able to generate a profit and loss. A profit and loss just tells you, did you either make a profit? Did you have a loss? And it has a number of different income and a different expense categories that will demonstrate the different amounts of money that and where you've brought in money and where you've spent money. There's also a balance sheet. Balance sheet shows you your assets, it shows your liabilities, and then you subtract those two and you get your equity. And then there's also a statement of cash flows that's just showing you your inflows and your outflows of cash and making sure that you're not going to run out of cash. And then it also helps you prepare your tax forms like your Schedule C. So I think that's it. I got information in here and record retention. Oh, and let me just mention one more thing because I think this is important, and I think that this will help everybody. It's where to get help when you're doing this. So I mentioned earlier that this is one of the things that IDRS does, that we provide free one-on-one assistance. So we're down there at the bottom. Feel free to reach out to me. Send me an email, mark@idrsinc.org. Of course, AJ's information was up there earlier. If you reach out to her, she can always put you in touch with me as well. But then there's other folks as well, like a local bookkeeper. So I used to be a bookkeeper that I would go into folks' businesses, and it doesn't have to be very expensive. I went into some businesses, I would only go in a couple hours a month or a couple hours every other week, right? And maybe that was costing the owner at that time. I don't think I was that expensive. May have been $60, $75, something like in that range, total, right, over 2 hours. So, and what I was able to do were those higher level accounting functions that maybe you're not comfortable with. Because like I had a gentleman that was elderly, but he was able to use QuickBooks. He could put in all that information. He could put in things like like when he would have a sale or when he would buy something. What he needed me to do is to come in and reconcile his accounts to make sure they balanced with his bank statements, right? Those are the things that he didn't have the accounting knowledge to do. And that's what he brought me in for a couple hours, but he was able to do everything else on QuickBooks. So once you get the hang of QuickBooks, it can be easy, but then you can get help. And it doesn't have to be somebody coming to you physically. A lot of these things can be done remotely. There's all kinds of different ways that somebody can help you with your accounting or other record keeping systems remotely. And then even just getting help as far as other resources that if you're doing it yourself. The public library, there's a ton of information online through LinkedIn Learning. A lot of times you can get access to LinkedIn Learning or Udemy free of charge through your library. Of course, YouTube, all those videos are free of charge. And then there's other organizations out there. So so we mentioned Akipaton. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I got to go back up here. Akiptan. And so they're a native CDFI. CDFI just stands for Community Development Financial Institution. That's essentially a lender for folks that are unable to get financing from a bank. And so there's a number of these native specific CDFIs around the country. So seek them out. They may not only be able to help with doing some of this financial work or record keeping assistance, but may even be able to finance your farm or ranching operation. There's SCORE, Service Corps Retired Executives, Small Business Development Center, Women's Business Center, and there's more farming specific organizations like Native Cooperative Extensions, Cooperative Extensions. And so a whole host of organizations are out there, and almost all of those organizations that I mentioned provide those resources totally free of charge. So that is my presentation. I know I gave you a lot in this, and I apologize for going over, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had kind of a whole survey of what we were doing in the record keeping, and really kind of not only take it from the beginning, the easy of starting with the shoebox method, but then also moving up and focusing on if you guys are ready to go using a spreadsheet with a computer or going more detailed and using computer-based accounting. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them through the chat box. You can also raise your hand. I can bring you off of mute. I should have mentioned at the beginning, this is a webinar, so everybody's automatically muted, but we have the tools here that we could unmute you. And but most of all, I thank you for coming, and please reach out to us. I'll put my email also in the chat box here, so you can copy that. And if there's any questions at all after this webinar, feel free to reach out. That's what both AJ and myself are here for. So thank you very much for coming, and look forward to working with you guys, and good luck to everybody in their farm and ranch operation or just general business.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you for giving the presentation, and thank you to everyone who was able to come. That's awesome.
Oh, and for everybody that did come, I was going to do an exercise in here. I'll make sure to send out the documents that we were going to do for that exercise, so you'll see that how you guys could do, how you can do the how you'll be able to use their spreadsheets, but you'll see them both as Excel files and also as Google Sheets. So you'll be able to get on there and start doing the accounting and doing computer-based accounting for yourself.
Yeah, people have mentioned too that receipts fade. Do you photocopy them by chance?
Yeah, and you know what? Another thing that that's out there that I have not used but is available is there's actually apps that you can utilize with your smartphone that will allow you to take pictures of your receipts, and it automatically categorizes the receipt for you, so you don't have to maintain the receipts. Once you take the picture of the receipt, it's already up there, and then it's categorizing. Now, I don't know all the different sophistication levels. I know there is some that actually integrates with some of the computer-based accounting systems that I talked about, but then there's also some that that are totally independent and just work as an app. But I know those are definitely out there, and you're right. Especially like if you leave a receipt in your car, they do fade, and heat is terrible for receipts. So find a way to keep them cool and keep them out of the sun, because the more you do that, the more likely you're better to preserve them. Oh, I think I see Stan. Any other training after this training? There is going to be training, but we don't have the date for you yet. But we are definitely working on some additional small business trainings that focus on farm and ranch operation. So those will be coming up, and we will definitely keep you posted as soon as we have those on the calendar. AJ and myself are even meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the next training.
Cool. And
All
then
right, well,
people are able to get the recording link, right, for those who registered?
yes. So for everybody, everybody that register, we'll make sure to send out those documents, and we'll send out a link to the recording. Yes, and thank you very much. Thank you, Jesse and Joe and Stan. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to you joining us next time. And I hope this helps and gave you some good information that you can utilize within your farm and ranch operation. Oh, you're welcome. Watto, we have a couple other Cherokee employees here, so very familiar with the Cherokee folks.
Cool.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I think I'm gonna say so long. Thank you very much, AJ. It was great.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
oh yeah, it looks like Michelle responded. I own a marina and some tacos. Thanks for all the accounting apps. Yeah, thank you for coming, Michelle. Any other questions? Please let us know. We'd be more than happy, and it would be very interesting to hear all about your marina. Okay, AJ, I'm sorry I interrupted, but thank you very much for coming and thank you for
Yeah.
co-hosting today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing all the good information for everyone to, yeah, take home for them. Yeah, thank you. It was really great.
Okay. Oh,
Hmm.
we'll see everybody later. So long, everybody.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Cool.